Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Mr. Wiz here. So if you are new to this channel, we build video games. Right now we are working our way through learning a lot about Unity. In the last lesson, we were coding flight controls for this plane simulation type game, and hopefully you finished that lesson and your plane is working the way you want it to. At the end of the lesson, we added some stuff to our plane so that if I run into something like this mountain here, my plane will spin out of control. And it does that because of the collider and the rigid body that we have on it. So the next steps that we have here now is I want to enhance the colliders a bit. And I want my game to actually do things when the plane runs into objects. So for instance, if the plane hits a mountain, the game should end or the game should restart. And then later, I'm going to add things to my game, collectibles that I can pick up to earn points, such as coins or Easter eggs that I could find, things of that nature, okay? So that's the goal of this video, is learning to enhance our colliders so that when the plane collides with certain objects, certain actions will occur. So, to get started on that, let's talk a little bit about the collider. So first I need to find my collider. I used a mesh collider on my plane, which I put on the Space Cruiser part. So just a quick reminder about that. Mesh colliders only work if you put them on the same part of your object that the mesh renderer is on, right? So that's why my collider is not on the main object itself. It is on the renderer part. Okay, so here's my collider. You've probably noticed with colliders, this little thing here that says is trigger. So basically, what isTrigger does is it allows the collider to work as a trigger or a button that would trigger an event, essentially. Button's probably not the best word for that, but I think you kind of get my drift. So, is the collider a trigger? Will it trigger an event? I'm going to go ahead and turn that on for my plane, because what I'm about to start coding is interactions, so that when the plane hits certain objects, it does trigger events. It does trigger actions. So I'm turning my plane collider into a trigger. All right, so that was step one. Now we're going to go ahead and start working on the actual code. So I'm just going to improve the player controller script that we already have. I could create a brand new script for this if I wanted to, but I'm just going to use the one I already have since it's already on the plane. No need to change it necessarily. So I've got this great script that is for the controls, but we're going to add some new things to it. So we've talked before about the functions. Inside my player control script, right now there are two functions. There's the start function right here, and anything that happens in here, anything that I put between these brackets, occurs when the program starts. So this event is triggered by the starting of the game, or the program, right? Then we have this function, which occurs every time the game updates. So anything in here will occur with every game update. So we are making a new function now. And to do this, we're going to call it private void. So it's a private function. And what we're going to use is on trigger enter. And we're going to put some parentheses right there. And then after the parentheses, I'm going to hit an enter, and I'm going to do the curly brackets, and I'm going to put enter there as well to create a little space. So you'll notice the layout is pretty much the same as with the start and with the update. They have the name, they have the parentheses, they have the brackets, just the same as mine, right? So on trigger enter, and then we have the brackets. So there are different types of events. On trigger enter is one of them. So on trigger enter means that if something enters the collider that is turned as a trigger, right? So we just turned the plane's collider into a trigger. So if something enters that collider, if something enters that trigger, it will put whatever action we put here will occur, okay? Now we're going to add a little bit more detail. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put collider other. That's going to help us later on. You'll see what I'm talking about there. Okay, so we have private void, on trigger enter, collider, other, and then in here is where I need to put the action that I want to occur. So right now, the only thing in my world is the mountains. When my player hits those mountains, I want the game to restart. That's what I've decided that I want to happen here. So in this blank, I'm going to put some code. It's a little bit complicated. Just a reminder, you really should be taking notes if you're going through this part of the course, because every single one of these videos, we're doing C# code. There's going to be things that we haven't talked about before. There's going to be new stuff. There's going to be a lot of information I'm throwing at you, so you really should be writing this stuff down somewhere, right? I would suggest using a Google Doc or something similar, and just when you're adding the new stuff to the code, probably copy and paste it and put it in your notes as well. That way you have something you can look at and you understand what it does, right? Maybe write some notes for yourself along with the code. Don't just copy and paste the code with no explanation, or else it's not going to help you. So you should probably copy and paste the code and then also explain why we did it, right? So for this code we've already have, maybe copy and paste some of these variables and some of this stuff, and then put in your notes how it works, why it works. That way later on when you forget, because you are going to forget, there's a lot of stuff in here, you can look at it, right? Notes are helpful, especially when you have a lot of information. I use notes when I'm making these videos because I don't remember all this stuff. I don't have this all memorized. I'm doing my best. All right, so here we go. Private void, on trigger, enter, collider, other. So the action that I need to happen when something enters this collider, this trigger, is to load a scene. So to do this, we're going to type in scene manager dot load scene. And then we have to put in what scene we want it to load. So we're going to do the parentheses, scene manager again. Keep in mind, spelling, capitals are all very important right now. And then the scene we want to load is the current scene. We just basically want to restart the scene. So we're going to put get active scene. We have little parentheses here. Dot build index. And then at the end of this whole thing, I'm going to put my semicolon to mark that it is the end of this line. So that is a lot of code there that I did not expect you to memorize. But what this line basically does is it's telling them that when something enters the collider of the plane that has the trigger, right, it's going to load the current active scene. Okay? Now, when I tested this earlier, it did not work because our current code is missing the part of Unity that actually knows how to read this. All right, so we do have to load up here. When we created this script, it came with these three lines, the system collections generic, and using Unity Engine. I do have to add a fourth line to this, and this allows the C# code to interpret what we're talking about when we're talking about the scene manager. Because when I first tried to run this, you know what? Rather than me just telling you, let me show you. Control S. If I go to run this right now, I'm going to get an error message. So in my console right here, there's my error message. It says the name scene manage and scene manager does not exist in the current context. Did I spell scene manager? Yeah, that's supposed to be manager. Okay, so it does not exist in the current context. Basically, that means that the C# code and Unity does not know what I mean when I'm talking about the scene manager. And it doesn't know what I mean because I need to add some more context for that. These lines up here are basically like, think of these as dictionaries, right? So when we're writing all these words and we're putting in all this stuff like transform.translate, time.delta time, the C# code, the Unity code, needs to know what we're referring to. And these books, these dictionaries up here, are essentially translating it for us, right? So here we're using a term, scene manager, that it doesn't recognize. I need to give it the information so that it can translate that. I feel like that's a pretty good way to describe it. So you will find that information in Unity Engine .scene management. So that little extra line up there, that little extra dictionary, if you will, helps Unity translate what I mean when I say scene manager. Now it has a place to look up that information. So let's go back to the code and see if it works now. All right, the error messages went away. Good. So if I coded this correctly, the plane still flies like normal. But what should happen is that if I collide with anything, because the plane's collider is now a trigger, so if anything enters that trigger, if I collide with anything, it's going to restart the scene, which means the plane will start back where it was before. So I'm going to go ahead and run into this mountain, Before it would have spun out of control, but now it should reload, and there it goes, right back to the beginning of the scene. It's working. It is working. So now that we have this, if you don't like your plane's starting position, feel free to move it, right? For instance, maybe you want to have your vehicle start at an airport or on a runway, and so the scene always starts with you taking off. That'd be kind of cool. Or if you're doing a space game, maybe it's flying away from a base at the beginning of the level, whatever. So now I have incentive not to crash, because every time I crash, it starts the level over. Okay, but that's not where I wanted to end this video, because not everything that I collide with is going to be a bad thing. There may be things in this world that I want to collide with, such as collectibles, coins, pickups, things of that nature, right? So, how do I tell the program that some things are good and some things are bad? How do I tell the program that if they hit one thing, I want it to act a certain way, but if they hit something else, I want it to act a different way? Hopefully you're catching some of these words I'm dropping here. If you took my Make Code Arcade course, you will know that a lot of things I just said are kind of hints about how I'm about to code it. I just use an if-then statement. If I'd hit this, then I want this to happen. That is an if-then statement. It's a logic blocks, logic code that is very important to most coding. So we will be using that. So let's go ahead and get started here. A lot of new information going forward. So this block, I only want to happen when I hit certain things, when I hit bad things like mountains or maybe buildings or other obstacles that might exist in my world. So how do I do that? How do I tell the program what is good and what is bad? I do that by setting up different kinds. You know, I've been talking a lot about MakeCode. Let's go ahead and pop over to an old MakeCode Arcade program. If you never took my MakeCode course, it's really great for beginners in coding. I would check it out. It's less advanced than this stuff, right? But I think some of you probably have taken my course, so hopefully this will be familiar jargon, okay? All right, so what I have right here is an old program that we made in my MakeCode course where we are flying and shooting asteroids and all this jazz, right? So this was back when we were learning about collisions and different things that were going on there. So here is part of the code where it says, on sprite of kind blaster overlaps with other sprite of kind projectile. And then it has destroy other sprite and destroy sprite. If you didn't take my MakeCode course, this doesn't mean anything to you. But if you did, this should look familiar. Basically, this block here, which is what we called an overlap block, says that if a sprite of a certain kind overlaps, which is another way of saying collides with, right? If it overlaps with another sprite, that's a different kind. So the way in this code that we differentiated things was using kinds. Different things in our world had different kinds. And when those kinds touched, we wanted different things to happen. This is JavaScript based. What we're doing in Unity is C# based. But the ideas are still the same. That's one of the fun things about coding. If you learn how to code in one computer language and you go to a different computer language, it can be completely different. But the concepts, the ideas that you learned will still carry over. It's the same concepts, even if it's written very differently. So what we are going to do in Unity is we're going to do the same thing we basically did here. We're going to create kinds to differentiate what things are in our world. That way, when we hit them, or we collide with them, or we overlap with them, we'll know what to do. Okay, so let's get back to the code. All right, so I only want this to happen when I hit a certain kind of object. Right now in our program, we don't have any kinds set up. If I click on the terrains, which are in my world, I want you to look up here where it says inspector and tag. Tag is what Unity calls kinds, okay? And right now it says it's untagged. So my terrains are untagged. If I click on my plane is also untagged. In fact, pretty much everything in my world is untagged right now except for the main camera. The main camera comes with its own tag of main camera. But everything else is right now untagged. So before I can create my if statement and say, hey, if the plane hits this object, do this. If the plane hits that object, do that. Before I can do that, I need to set up the kinds. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So my player object, which is this cruise fighter here, yours could be something else. My player object that is currently untagged, I'm going to go ahead and switch that over to player. That might be helpful down the road. So we need to know who the player is and who the other things are. So my cruise fighter is now set to player. My terrains, I need to set a tag for them. So if I look through the list here, there's already a lot of tags here. But that doesn't mean I'm limited to just these. Because if I'm looking through this, none of these really fit what I feel like my terrain should be. So I'm going to add a new tag. And now that I've done that, it goes me to this area where it says tags, list is empty. I can click this plus sign here. And I'm going to go ahead and name a new tag. It doesn't really matter what I name it, but just so I know what it does, right? So in my case, this tag, I could just call it mountains, but I might add more things to my world later. For instance, maybe I decide to add buildings to my world. Is the plane going to act different when it hits a mountain versus a building? Probably not. It's going to crash either way, right? So I'm going to give this tag a name that's a little bit more general that I could put on anything that I want to crash my plane, right? What should I call it? I think I'm going to call it obstacle. I just need to make sure I'm spelling it correctly there. All right, so I'm going to call this an obstacle. So anything I put in my world that I don't want to hit, that if I hit it, it will crash my plane and I have to start all over, will be set as an obstacle. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So now I have a new tag in my world called obstacle. So let's go back and let's select the terrain here. And I've got 4 pieces of terrain. Let me zoom out real quick. I've got 4 pieces of terrain. I can do this all at once just by selecting multiples. I've talked about this before, but if you ever need to select multiple things, you click on the first one, hold down Shift, click on the last one, and it highlights them all. If they're not all together, you can hold down Control, and you can click on each one individually. So if I'm just setting these 3 and not that one, I could do that, right? So I'm going to select all the things in my world that I'm going to set up as an obstacle. And then just to make it easy for myself, I'll do it all at once. So where it says tag, untagged, I'm going to change this to the new tag that I just created called obstacle. All right, so now the mountains, all the terrain in my world is considered an obstacle. Now I can start creating my logic blocks for those obstacles. So I'm going to go back to the code. And in here, we're going to, so I'm still inside the on-trigger of enter. Make sure you're coding between the brackets, right? The place that you put your code is important. So in this event, in this function, on-trigger enter, we are going to create our first logic block. If you did the lesson with me where we built a train for our plane, then I guess technically that was your first logic block. But if you didn't do that lesson, this will be our first encounter with it. So to make a logic block, we first do if. Then we put our little parentheses here. After that, I'm going to put enter, and I'm going to do a curly bracket. So a pair of curly brackets. I'm going to hit enter between those just to create it nice and neat. So this is essentially what a logic block looks like, what an if block looks like. If whatever I put inside these 2 parentheses, that is my condition. That is the thing that if it is true, the next action will take place. So if something is true, and then between the 2 curly brackets is my action. So in this case, oh, I deleted part of my code by accident. That said scene manager, right? Pretty sure that's what it said. Scene manager. I did not mean to delete that. All right, so we're going to move this stuff between my 2 curly brackets for the if. I'm just indenting to make it a little bit neater. Okay. So if a certain action occurs, then we're going to restart the scene, right? And the action that needs to occur is that it needs to collide with an object that is called an obstacle that has that tag, okay? So how do I write that? So inside the curly bracket, I'm sorry, not inside the curly brackets, inside the regular parentheses here, this is where I write my condition. So if, parentheses, other dot compare tag. Where did that come from? The other that I'm referring to here is the same other that you see right here. It's basically saying that on trigger enter, when something hits the plane and it's hitting an other collider, a different object, right? We're going to compare the tag of that other object. Just like in MakeCode, we had sprite and other sprite, same idea here. So on trigger enter, when it collides with something, when it collides with another object, we're going to compare the tag of that other object. And so now I put my parentheses again. We have a new set of parentheses and a set of quotes. And this is where I put the name of the tag. And I have to put obstacle. And I have to write it exactly the same way I wrote it when I created it. Same spelling, same capitals, super important. So if the other's tag is obstacle, then do this. All right, time to save it. A lot of coding we just did there. Let's test it out and make sure it still works correctly. So really, my program shouldn't play any differently. We just want to make sure it still works. So since the terrains are now obstacles, if I hit an obstacle or if I hit the terrain, it should restart the level. So let me go ahead and crash into something here. It worked. Now, of course, the terrains are the only thing in my world right now, but if I had other things in my world that were not obstacles, I would be able to crash into them without restarting the game, because my code says that it should only restart if the tag of the object I hit is an obstacle. All right. So we got all that working correctly. It's time to put other objects in our world, because I want another object in my world that are going to be positive things, things that I can use to collect points. All right. So I don't have anything like that in my world right now. I'm going to go ahead and just create something. Feel free to download something from the asset store if you want to. Maybe you want to find some coins or something that fits your game that you have to collect. You know, I'm just going to make an object real quick here. So I'm going to right click in my hierarchy. I'm going to create a 3D object. I'm going to use a cylinder. Let me zoom in on it. Oops, I didn't mean to change the name, but that's okay. I can change it. I'll call it coin. So I'm going to make something kind of coin shaped is what I'm going to do. But you can do whatever you want to, right? This will be our collectible. So just real quick here, I'm going to take the cylinder and I'm going to kind of flatten it a little bit, turn it into something that's kind of coined up in a shaped, right? Let's make it negative 90 degrees for the rotation. There we go. So I've got something that looks kind of like a coin. Now I just need to put a material on it. And I could make a material, but you guys know how to make materials by now, or at least you should if you did my other videos, right? So I'm just going to grab something I already have. What materials do I already have here? I'll use this one. Kind of like a gold coinish. If I have time later on, I might get fancier with it, right? Okay, so I've got an object here. This is going to be my collectible, my coin. All right? Now, in order for the trigger to work, when I touch it, it does need to have a collider. It looks like this already came with a capsule collider. That capsule collider doesn't really fit it very well, though. So I should probably change it to something that's going to fit it better. So let me remove the capsule collider. And I'm going to put a mesh collider on this as well. So that way it fits the actual coin shape. Do I need to make it convex? Yeah, I'm going to make it convex. Okay. So you can see the little edges of the mesh collider fits my coin pretty well. Now, do I need to turn this into a trigger? Not in this scenario, because the plane is the trigger, right? So I don't need both objects to be triggers. If I was going to write a code specifically for this coin, then I should probably make it a trigger and I should probably write the code and put it on the coin, right? But my code is on the plane, so I'm pretty much good the way it is. I can leave it as just a regular convex mesh collider for now, and that should be fine. I do need to give it a tag, though. So right now it's set as untagged. I'm going to create a new tag, just like I did a second ago. And what should I call my new tag? Collectible? I like that. Collectible IBLE or ABLE? I don't know. But I'm spelling it with an I, so I'll have to remember that, because I remember I have to write the same way in the code. Hopefully that's spelled correctly. I never said I was a good speller. All right. That doesn't, I don't know. Maybe, is it an A or an I? Collectible. Ugh. I'm going to go with I. All right. So I'm saving this. Oh, yeah. I need to go back and tag it now. So switching the tag to collectible. Okay. So the object is now a collectible object. I can put it somewhere in my world. Let's put it in front of the plane, somewhere where I can see it and easily fly into it, hopefully. All right, let's just see right now. If I run into it, nothing should happen. Whoop, I missed it completely. All right, let's raise it up a little bit higher so it'll be easier for me to hit. I think my plane's too fast. Now that was too high. I'll go down a little bit. There it is. Woo! All right. So nothing should happen when I hit it right now because it is not an obstacle type. It is a collectible type. So I need to create my logic block on what I want to happen when I collide with a collectible type. So I'm going to do the same sort of thing here. In fact, I could probably copy some of this code just to make my life a little bit easier. I love copy-paste, Control-C, Control-V. You know, less coding. You just have to remember to change the important parts. So I'm going to change obstacle to collectible. And I spelled it with an I believe. So I'm going to spell it the same way I did before. And this time I do not want it to restart the scene. So I'm going to delete that whole line. And I need to decide what action do I want it to take. So the first thing I need it to do is I need it to destroy the coin. So when I touch it, it disappears and I can only collect it once. So to do that, we're going to put destroy. So I'm putting destroy other dot game object. End it with the semicolon. Just so you know that other is important and it's working the same way that other worked over here. So when it's saying destroy other game object, which game object is it talking about? The one that it collided with. So let's just read this code like human beings for a second. So on trigger, enter. So when something enters the trigger, which is the collider on the plane, the other collider, if that other object's tag is a collectible, destroy the other object. That's why we're using other here. If I just put destroy game object, it would destroy the plane. We don't want to destroy the plane. We want to destroy the coin. So destroy other game object is what we're putting there. All right, so let's save it real quick and make sure that it works. Can I hit the coin is the real question. Oh, I hit it. It disappeared. Cool. All right, so it does work. We're going to do one more thing now. I want to, in addition to destroying the coin, I want it to give me a little message to let me know that I got a point. Now, we're not at the point yet. We haven't created user interface yet. So this will not be a message the player sees. This will be a message I see. Down here in the console, this is where we get all our error messages, right? In the console tab. You can also put other things here that aren't error messages. Little notes for yourself as a coder to see how progress is going, to see how things are working. So we're going to put a little note here to let us know that we did actually get the point, that it recorded the point. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to create another line here. And on the second line, we're going to put debug.log. Put my parentheses, put a quote, and I'm going to type a message for myself that I should get when I collect the point. Let's do +1 points. So again, this is not something a player will see. This is something that only the programmer will see because it will appear in the console window. All right, I put my semicolon at the end. We're going to go ahead and save that. And let's check it. So now when I touch the coin should disappear and a new message should appear down here in the console window to let me know that I got 1 point. There we go. It says +1 points. You guys see that? So now that I have that, and this is working correctly, I think I should probably save my coin as a prefab. I don't have a prefab folder, so let me make one real quick. Hopefully, prefabs are not a new idea for you guys, because hopefully you took that lesson where we learned all about them. But the benefits of prefabs, there's actually lots of benefits of prefabs. But one of the main benefits of prefabs is that as a prefab, I can put these coins in my world now. I'm going to delete the original. Now that's a prefab. I can delete the original. I can put many of these coins different places without having to worry about it. I can just kind of drop them wherever I want them, and they will all work the exact same way. But another benefit of having prefabs is that later on, if I update my coin, if I change any of the code, or if I change the way it looks, if I do anything to this coin later on, they will all change as long as I'm changing the prefab. That's the big benefit. So now I have 6 coins in my world. Let's see if I can find them. This might be kind of tricky. Oh, wow. They're like near the ground. Okay, I should change where they're at. I didn't realize I put them on the ground. I thought they were in the sky. Yeah, that's going to be really hard for me to hit. All right, let's select all the coins. Let's move them up. Holding down the shift. Let's set their Y position to something pretty high up. Maybe, what would 100 look like? 100's all the way up there. That works for me. All right, so now I should be able to hit them without hitting the ground. If I can see them. Oh, there it is. Ah! My fingers were not on the buttons correctly. Let me try this again. A bit hard to see. I might need to make my coins bigger. Ooh, I think I missed it. Yeah, I missed it because it didn't appear in my window, and I crashed. So clearly I'm bad at my own game. But this gives you a little bit to get started with, right? So at this point in time, I would encourage you to start putting those collectibles, whatever you ended up being. Oh, there's one. Put them in your world. Have fun trying to collect them. Decide how big they're going to be. Decide where you want to put them. You might want to put a bunch of them in a row, right? So that it's easy for the player to find them. Or you might want to hide them. Make it really tricky. It's really up to you. Let me warn you about one other thing, though. In my console window, it says collapse here. You can turn that on or off. What is the difference? Well, basically, if you have collapse turned on and you get the same message multiple times, it will appear as one line. And it'll just have a number behind it showing how many times you hit it. If collapse is not turned on, the message will appear one after the other, after the other, after the other. So if I have 6 coins and I collect them all, I'll see the +1 point message 6 times. If collapse is on, I'll see the message 1 time with the number 6 behind it. Make sense? So just wanted to warn you about that. Okay, so this is a great place to stop the video. I hope you learned something new. If you did learn something new, please like this video. So let me know that you learned something. Just hit that like button. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great rest of your day.